10. The Killer Cave. There is a terrifying underwater cave that supposedly kills anyone who enters it. It's located in Croatia, a major hotspot for travelers across Europe and the rest of the world. Beautiful beaches, rich history, and creepy underwater caverns. It's a fabulous place to go cave diving and one of the most dangerous. The killer cave we're talking about today is called the Pogonica Underwater Cave, located in Pogonica Bay. Back in July of 2015, a pair of divers lost their lives while trying to explore this sunken hole in the ground. One of them was a Croatian national, the other a German tourist. They were just like any other divers in Croatia, eager to unravel the mysteries of the impenetrable darkness of the hole under the bay. The issue was that Pogonica Cave is a bit sinister. It begins with a relatively wide opening, something that almost feels welcoming to experienced divers. But then the opening gradually gets more narrow and goes deeper and deeper until the divers find themselves suddenly lost in a labyrinth of passages. Sadly, the 2015 divers never managed to find their way out and ran out of oxygen. The caves here are so confusing that it took the rescue divers over a month to retrieve their bodies. There have actually been at least 4 deaths total connected to this cave, including one diver who allegedly stabbed himself in the chest when he realized he was going to drown, instead of slowly dying in misery. 9. Underwater and out of air. On April 15, 2017, Cisco Gracia slipped into the water to go cave diving. It was Cisco's favorite thing to do. He was a geology teacher who spent his weekends exploring all kinds of creepy underwater cave systems on the island of Mallorca, an island in Spain some say is more beautiful underground than it is above. On this fateful day in April, the cave Cisco and his friend wanted to explore was called Sa Piqueta, a dangerous underwater labyrinth only reachable by swimming beneath the surface for over an hour. Cisco collected rock samples, while his swimming partner went off to map out a nearby chamber. Everything went swimmingly until they started heading back to the surface. They met at a junction, but the water was suddenly filled with silt, and it was extremely difficult to see. And that was when they realized their guideline, which was supposed to lead them back to the surface, had somehow broken. They couldn't find it, which meant that they had no way to find the exit. In other words, they were trapped inside an underwater maze. They spent about an hour trying to find the rope, but to no avail. And at this time, they had already consumed most of their air. They found an air pocket, and Cisco gave his friend the rest of his air in hopes that his partner could make it to the surface and get help. For the next 60 hours, Cisco sat in an air pocket within the labyrinth waiting for somebody to rescue him. He was losing hope. He was slowly being poisoned from breathing the horrible air of the underground cavern. And he was close to dead. But finally, over 2 days later, he was rescued and saved. It was an incredibly close call, and a miracle that his partner had found his way out of the cave at all. 8. The Vanishing of Ben McDaniel. Ben McDaniel was reported missing on August 18, 2010. A couple of divers at Vortex Spring in Florida noticed that his pickup truck had been sitting outside the local drive shop for over 2 days. When they made some inquiries, they learned that Ben had been diving at Vortex Spring while hanging out at his parents' beach house. He was last seen entering a mysterious underwater cave, but nobody knew what happened to him after. It soon became clear that Ben had never left that cave and that he was still in there somewhere. 12 years later, we still haven't found the body of Ben McDaniel. The cave he was diving in only goes 58 feet or 18 meters below the surface. It's not that big of a cave, and his body has never been found by any other divers. There was a rescue operation to retrieve his corpse, but it wasn't located. His family believes it's probably stuck in some sort of inaccessible niche in the cave system, but no one knows. For all anyone knows, Ben McDaniel faked his own death and never even went down into that cave. 7. The Underwater Everest. In October of 2016, a pair of divers were discovered dead in an underwater cave system in Florida. This underwater cave system is so treacherous and challenging even to experienced divers that its nickname is Mount Everest. Patrick Peacock and Chris Rittenmeyer journeyed to the cave in Weeki Wachee all the way from Fort Lauderdale for what was supposed to be a 3-day adventure. They would be diving every day at Eagle's Nest, the underwater labyrinth that goes over 300 feet or 91 meters deep. It's basically an underwater prison with miles of interconnecting passages. Patrick and Chris entered the water with a third friend, Justin Blakely, at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Since Justin was the least experienced of the trio, he was instructed to remain closer to the surface. The other 2 divers were supposed to check in after approximately 60 minutes. When they failed to check in, failed to surface, and time started dragging, Justin alerted the proper authorities. Unfortunately, it was too late. Patrick and Chris had gone down 260 feet, or 79 meters, and wormed their way into an extraordinarily complex part of the cave system. Once there, they couldn't get back out, and sadly, that was where they died. It should come as no surprise then that in front of the cave, there's a stark warning to travelers, a sign that reads, "Stop, prevent your death, go no farther." And the sign even has a sketch of the Grim Reaper on it. 6. Dion Dreyer. Dion Dreyer was a recreational scuba diver from South Africa who took on the Bushman's Hole on December 17, 1994. The Bushman's Hole is also known as Bosmansgat Cave, located in South Africa's Northern Cape. Dion was only 20 years old, but was already considered an extraordinarily skilled diver. He went down as part of a practice dive, but something went wrong about 150 feet or 45 meters below the surface. Dion lost consciousness, probably because of oxygen toxicity, meaning he was breathing too quickly and too deep, and it caused him to pass out. Dion died down there, and his corpse got stuck somewhere inside the cave system. He was the second victim of the Bushman's Hole, after Eben Layden blacked out at around the same depth in 1993. 2 weeks after Dion died, a remotely operated submarine was used to look for his body. They found his dive helmet, but no corpse. Almost 10 years later, extreme diver Dave Shaw set a world record by diving over 885 feet or 270 meters deep in the Bushman's Hole. And there, lying in the silt at the bottom of the deepest freshwater cave in South Africa, he found the remains of Dion Dreyer. Dave successfully exited the cave, and he told everyone about what he had found on the bottom. He promised Dion's parents that he would go back later and get the boy's body out. On January 8, 2005, Dave went back into the hole with the intention of bringing out the body of Dion Dreyer. But something awful happened while he was down there, and Dave died during the recovery process. He never came back out of that hole, although he did keep his promise. 3 days after his death, the bodies of Dave and Dion came floating to the surface. 5. Mossdale Caving Disaster. The Mossdale caving disaster is considered one of the worst cave accidents in history. It was the summer of 1967, and 6 young men descended into the Mossdale Caverns, located in Yorkshire in the UK. They weren't actually diving, but just exploring by wiggling through the narrow passages and descending deeper and deeper into scary tunnels and chambers. The 6 friends made it all the way past a part of the cave called the Marathon Crawl and wound up inside of a stream. They were lying on their bellies in a narrow tunnel with the stream water only up to their chests. What they had never expected was that the water would suddenly start to rise. The friends began to shuffle forward as quickly as they could, hoping to reach higher ground before the tunnel suddenly flooded. It's important at this juncture to back things up a bit. When the party had originally entered the cave, they already knew there was a chance of thunderstorms. Some of them didn't want to go on with it because it seemed just a little too dangerous. And as it turned out, it absolutely was. It wound up being a torrential downpour, with the entire cave flooding in a matter of only 3 hours. The water bubbled out of the cave's entrance, and the 6 explorers were still way down in its depths. Still lodged inside the tunnel, they all drowned like rats in a sewer pipe. 4. Blue Hole Horror. Near the legendary Blue Hole, located in New Mexico near Santa Rosa, there are a series of mysterious underwater caves. In 1976, 2 scuba divers from Oklahoma delved deep into the Blue Hole to explore it and wound up dead. Following their tragic deaths, the Blue Hole was closed. Then, 40 years later, a group of elite divers with the ADM Exploration Foundation were given special permission to enter the caves over just 1 weekend. They would be the first people to go down into the Blue Hole in 40 years. But sadly, history repeated itself yet again. Scuba diving instructor, 43-year-old Shane Thompson from San Diego, along with his diving partner, Mike Young, went into the deep hole looking for passageways. Mike entered a small chamber about 190 feet or 58 meters deep, and Shane followed. According to Santa Rosa police officer Mike Ghana, that was when everything went terribly wrong. The pair had kicked up too much silt and had zero visibility. They tried to backtrack using their guideline, but Shane pulled on it too hard, and it came loose in their hands. The 2 men were then stuck fumbling through the dark and got themselves wedged into a narrow passageway. Shane took a wrong turn and got trapped, stuck in an unknown underground chamber. By the time Mike found him, he was already dead. Mike made it out of the hole alive, and Shane's body was recovered the next day. But seeing as this was the first special permission given for people to go diving here, it's probably not going to happen again. Every time people go diving into the Blue Hole, somebody drowns. 3. The Mount Gambier Accident. There's a flooded sinkhole named the Shaft near Mount Gambier in southern Australia. In 1973, 4 recreational scuba divers went exploring in the sinkhole. But they blew past their planned limits, didn't use a guideline, became lost, ran out of air, and drowned. They were the only 4 people that ever died inside the shaft, and their bodies were pulled out one by one over the next year. What happened to the 4 scuba divers was an unfortunate incident of overconfidence. They thought they could go deeper than they really could, but they didn't have the air to back up their exploration. And while their deaths were awful, they did help the Australian government to put laws in place to restrict access to cave diving venues. And thanks to that, not just anyone can go willy-nilly into whatever cave they want anymore. 2. Father-son Christmas disaster. A father and son took their final breaths together on Christmas night in 2013. It was a Christmas tragedy like no other. Darren Spivey had gotten his son Dylan, only 15 years old, new diving equipment as a Christmas present. Darren was a certified diver, although not for cave diving. His son, on the other hand, wasn't certified to do anything. Nonetheless, the pair set out on Christmas night to the Eagle's Nest, the treacherous cave in Florida that would claim the lives of Patrick Peacock and Chris Rittenmeyer 3 years later in 2016. They were witnessed by a couple of hunters in the area at about 11 o'clock in the morning, who saw them suited up and ready to dive. Sadly, nobody ever saw them again, at least not alive. Eric Deester, a rescue diver, said the father and son reached a depth of 233 feet, or 71 meters, using nothing but air tanks. This was a big mistake because professional cave divers know not to descend any lower than 218 feet, or 66 meters, unless they have a specialized mixture of helium, oxygen, and nitrogen. It appeared that the father and son lost track of time. They each ran out of air, and that was it. The father was found with his air hose dangling between his legs, suggesting in his final moments he had tried to save his son by offering him what little air he had left. 1. Parker Turner. Parker Turner was a relatively famous cave explorer who lost his life in November of 1991. He and his exploration partner, Bill Gavin, were planning on exploring Indian Springs in Wakulla County, Florida. They had planned everything out perfectly, but it was just not their day. The unimaginable happened shortly after they entered the underwater cave system. There was an unexpected sudden collapse, which caused a flow reversal and trapped the team underwater. Bill Gavin was the only one who made it out with his life. Parker Turner drowned. To this day, nobody really knows what caused the collapse at Indian Springs. The surface personnel witnessed a massive drop in the water level in the basin, while Parker and Bill witnessed a sort of underwater landslide within the cave. It was the landslide that caused them to lose visibility and their guideline, and that led to Parker's death. Bill estimated that about 100,000 gallons of water had rushed into the cave, then dispersed about 30 minutes later, returning the water to its normal level. But nobody knows how on earth it all happened. Would you rather get stuck 10 feet or 3 meters underwater in a submerged cave, or 200 feet or 61 meters deep in a dry cave? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe and come back soon for another great video.